Ladies and gentlemen, dear colleagues, good morning and welcome to you and those following us remotely to the Research and Innovation Days and to our session on transforming food systems for people, planet and climate. I am Wolfgang Burtscher. I am a Deputy Director General in the Department for Research and Innovation of the European Commission, and I'm very pleased and privileged to moderate these sessions with 6 distinguished speakers. 3 are already on the panel, on a topic that I think is at the heart of the public debate, in particular in the context of climate change. And I just would like to show you a random selection of press articles that we have collected over the recent weeks, which show the intensity of the debate on this matter, the direction of this debate, but also the nuances related to this debate. All these articles, they have something in common. They strongly refer to scientific studies, not always having the same conclusions. So, how we will structure the rollout of this session? Let me first start by a short policy frame, and then I will indicate as to how we will go about in involving you, the audience, in this process. There is no doubt that climate change and environmental degradation exercise an increasing pressure on our food production system. Just take as an example, 1 degree Celsius rise of global temperature will cut average global cereal crop yields by 3 to 10%. At the same time, nobody questions negative environmental and health impacts associated with unsustainable food production systems. So we urgently need more sustainable food production systems, and there is strong agreement that research and innovation are indispensable if we want to achieve such alternative food production systems that are beneficial both to climate and to health. I think that Horizon Europe, with its clusters on health, but particularly also the cluster on food, bioeconomy, agriculture, natural resources and environment, with a dedicated intervention area on food systems, provides the basis for such research and innovation. But in order to get our priorities right in this domain, we really need your views regarding the topics and the priorities we need to address. I think we need research and innovation on these topics, that goes without saying, but we also have to consider, once we know what is the way forward in terms of sustainable food production systems, how we ensure that our citizens, our society, our stakeholders adhere to this new food production system. So research and innovation is also about social behavior. We do not start at scratch when it comes to European Commission. We have already laid down our basic considerations in Food 2030 work, which calls for a more systemic approach in R&I policy to deliver co-benefits for climate and health. And I think you can also be sure that research and innovation in this area will receive big political support of our political hierarchy. You have certainly noted the priorities of our President-elect von der Leyen, who puts the Green Deal as one of her key priorities in her political priorities. And part of this Green Deal is the strategy, Farm to Fork, strategy on sustainable food, and the biodiversity file. Evidently, if you have carefully studied the program of our R&I days, you have also seen that there is a close relation between the topics which we are dealing with today on food systems and other priorities in Horizon Europe, like the mission on soil health and food, circular food cities, the microbiome, bioeconomy. And we have just started, or our chief scientists have just started to work on how to ensure that people and stakeholders adhere to new food strategies based on science. So this is the policy frame. Now, how will we go about the session? We have two lighthouse panels. The first one is here. Before I introduce the speaker, we also intend to use Slido, so we will make a short test and get you into Slido. The idea is that once we have had the speakers on all the three elements, we will have Slido questions, and then it is up to you to make statements, questions to the topic which we have just, which is our topic for our today's session. So now on Slido, I think you see the instructions on the screen. Open the internet, go to the www.slido.com. So please just follow all these elements and then reply to the question. This is just a test so that afterwards we can have your very specific feedback on the different questions our panelists will raise. I think the room is conceived for about 100 participants, so still 50 have not yet. Can we see the interim results, just to have a flavor? No, it's gone. So anyhow, I understood that there is quite a broad participation, public authorities, research, private sector, all the players that should be involved, I think, if we want to achieve a more sustainable food system. So I think we can now start with the first speakers. And I would like to invite Corinna Hawkes. She's a director of the Center for Food Policy at the University of London, and she will provide a speech on transforming food systems for co-benefits, how to make it real. Please, Corinna.
Thank you. Thanks very much. And thanks very much for the invitation to be here this morning. Good morning, everyone. The message I'm going to be sharing with you this morning is that we need to redesign the food systems economy. I'm just going to stop because I'm hearing a lot of feedback from this microphone. Are you hearing it okay? Okay, I'll carry on then. So I'll be sharing the message with you this morning that we need to redesign the food systems economy for co-benefits for health, sustainability and economy. And to do that, we need research and innovation. And a lot of what I'm going to say is taken from a report I published with my colleague Kelly Parsons by the European Health Observatory, which came out last December, from which this image comes. It's also taken from a series of policy briefs, which the Centre for Food Policy has been publishing over the past few months and will publish more of. And there are copies available of the 3 that are currently available at the back of the room. So it's never been so clear that what we eat is vital for people and planet, for health and the well-being of the planet. And it's never been so clear that we need to redesign the food system in order to improve what we eat. In other words, We need to redesign the interconnected system of everything and everybody that influences and influenced by the activities that bring food from farm to fork and beyond. Easier said than done, redesigning that. Now, I've been working in this field for about 20 years, and there's a lot that has changed in those 20 years. Back then, if you use the term food system, you were kind of seen as some kind of hippie type with your head in the clouds. Now it's UN agencies who use that term, it's governments, it's big business, and of course it's used right here in Brussels. So that has changed. Back then, poor quality diets seen mainly as a problem for the stupid and ill-educated. Now it's understood what an important global problem it is, and that it's a structural issue. Back then, energy, transport were often seen as the main culprits of climate change. Now we're turning to the food system to look for solutions. So that has changed, and lots of other things have changed in the dynamics of the food system. But there are some things that haven't changed. And one of those things are the fundamental imperatives driving the food system. If you look at the imperative in the post-war period of what was driving the food system, very crudely put, it was producing more food. In the last 20 years, that's changed. It's become about meeting consumer demand in a way that delivers food in an economically competitive way, that enables producers and nations to remain economically competitive on the world market, and to support and enable big businesses and businesses to flourish and provide jobs, and more latterly, to support environmental goals. And between them, those two sets of imperatives have been incredibly successful in producing an amazing array of food. So we've actually had quite a successful food system, but also one which is full of incredibly important problems. Here's three of them. The first one is that while the food system is meant to be about meeting consumer demand, it's also done a lot to mobilize, and some would say actually manipulate consumer demand. So consumers are actually consuming foods that are not good for their health. So what we have now is a food economy which fundamentally relies on people getting sick. The second thing is that while some people have earned good money from this food system, others who are doing equally important work have not. It's inequitable and it's economically ruthless. And the third thing is that while many, many laudable actions have been taken to meet environmental goals through food systems change, it simply hasn't been enough. We just need to do a lot more. And throughout this time, too, when these problems have been emerging, there's been another problem, which is that we've treated the food system as a set of disconnected parts, rather than a system. Because whether we like it or not, the food system is interconnected. It just is. So what we need for the 21st century is a food system which is treated as a connected system, which is a thriving food economy, producing food from a thriving economy, which is good for health and is also good for the environment. In other words, a whole system designed to have co-benefits. It's that sweet spot, that red tick in the middle. The whole food system focused on producing nutritious, healthy foods, with the unhealthy foods a kind of little sideline. Produced from a system that generates wealth for farmers, for small and medium-sized enterprises, for big business, for nations, wealth that is shared equitably. And from a food systems workforce which is skilled and decently paid and have decent livelihoods. And that food is affordable. And it's produced from a system which supports environmental goals, which reduces greenhouse gas emissions, waste, etc., energy use, etc., and with good standards of animal welfare. That is a massive, huge ask. But if we were to do that, then we'd achieve these policy goals around the outside, which are the goals of the different Director Generals of the European Union, but could well be the Sustainable Development Goals. So how do we start? How do we start creating this new food economy? The first thing to do is to find a tangible space in which we can make the connections between health, environmental sustainability and economy. A tangible space. I mean something like an investment program in small and medium-sized enterprise. I mean things like public procurement, things like short supply chains, things like the Common Agricultural Policy. Spaces where there are the potential to make these kinds of connections. Second, ask if in these spaces they're dominated by sustainable, nutritious foods. And if they are, fantastic. Find out what economic model is working for them and learn from that. Thirdly, if they're not dominated by nutritious and sustainable foods, then ask what the economic barriers are to making that happen. Find out what the economic incentives and disincentives are in that system that are preventing making change happen. And for that and all of these things, we need research and innovation. We need research and innovation that tells us what are the economic incentives and disincentives that are controlling the current system. What are the business models that are working for how sustainable an economy that we can learn from? What are the big fiscal and economic levers that can change the incentives of the system so that we have a new economy? And how can we test and pilot innovation and then see what happens when we do that? But to do all of this, we also need good public policy. And that means that we need an integrated policy, a connected policy, a joined-up policy in order, and that's the subject of a new policy brief that's out from the Centre for Food Policy today, which is at the back of the room, a system, a public policy framework which makes it easier for the economic actors to align what they are doing with health and sustainability so we can have co-benefits across the system. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Corina, for showing us in such an impressive manner what a future sustainable food system requires in terms of interconnectivity. I think this slide really shows the huge task that is also ahead of us, because creating these, as you have called, common places or meeting places where all these different sectors are getting together is a big challenge in terms of governance. But I think it reflects the realities. So our next speaker is Jamie Morrison. He's from the FAO, and he's there a strategic program manager relating to food systems program, and he will talk about urban food systems as ecosystems of change. Please, Jamie.
Thank you, Wolfgang, and good morning to everybody. Considering urban food systems as ecosystems of change, or common places, as Corina may discuss them, can help us find our way through some of the complexity of food systems and foster more coordinated action. Both the structure and the needs of urban areas forces us to take a more holistic approach to dealing with issues from the procurement of food through to the disposal of its waste. It also adds a greater visibility to some of the critical issues that we're trying to deal with in transforming food systems, from obesity to waste, much more visible in urban areas. At FAO, we found much greater traction in supporting municipalities or local governments in stimulating transformation of food systems than we have working at national levels. So it gives us a real site that we can take action from. It's here that we see the most innovative efforts to develop co-benefits, for example, through the application of principles of circular bioeconomy, which I'll come back to a little later. And also between disjointed policy domains. Wolfgang has hinted at this. It's much easier, in a sense, to create food policy councils at a municipal level, which bring together different elements of the policy domain in order to find a common way forward. And I think the important thing to note is that, and as this slide, I think, represents quite dramatically, it's not easy because we're focusing in on a small part of the food system. Quite the opposite. It's now more than 70% of food which is produced globally is consumed within urban areas. Urban areas account for at least 60% of energy demand, and this is increasing, not least through issues of cold storage, refrigeration, which was required when transporting and storing food in urban areas, but also through the transportation itself. And a number of other statistics which I think are quite stark and force us to take this issue very seriously when it comes to the issue of urbanization. So focusing on urban food systems can have a massive impact. And this impact will not only be seen in terms of the consumers having greater access to more nutritious food, particularly those more vulnerable consumers in urban areas, but also for the opportunity that it creates for producers for processors, for retailers along the chain, both in serving the growing domestic markets, growing urban areas in their own economies, but also increasingly in their trading partners. And it's this rural-urban continuum that we focus on at FAO. And indeed, it's the first principle, or first guiding principle of FAO's new framework on urban food agenda. And if you could just change the slide, please, Cindy, to that one. So what the urban food agenda that we launched earlier this year attempts to do is to bring together quite disperse areas of work which affect or help in the transformation of food systems within urban areas. And we structured this around 3 levels, the 3 E's as we call it: enabling, executing, and expanding. In terms of enabling, the enabling environment, what we've been trying to do is focusing in on national urban policies, ensuring that food is central in national urban policies, but also that they're devised in such a way that they're representative of the very diverse situations that different urban areas face, from the large mega cities to the small towns in rural communities. Larger cities tend to be more focused on how they bring food into cities, not so much with the production. In smaller cities, there's much more focus on accessing food from territorial regions surrounding those towns, within the towns themselves, so that the needs for different urban areas from national urban policies are quite different in terms of what they're trying to do. There's a wide continuum. And what we're finding is that we need policies which are reflective of that diversity, but that we're really constrained at the moment because in most urban areas we simply don't have sufficient data on food, how food's consumed, how it's procured, how it's taken into cities. And this is really constraining the extent to which we can identify optimal interventions to stimulate the transformation of food systems in a way which generates co-benefits, but which doesn't do so at the same time as creating negative impacts on vulnerable groups of consumers or indeed vulnerable groups of producers. I appreciate we're focused today on Europe, but at the Food and Agriculture Organization, obviously we have a particular focus on developing countries. And there is a great danger that as urban areas within developing countries expand, the reliance is more and more on imported foodstuff with the health ramifications that can bring, but also at the expense of domestic producers. So we have to be quite cognizant of that. At the second level of action, executing actions, this is where support is provided to municipalities in actually putting into place concrete actions on the ground, whether it be in terms of shortening supply chains, ensuring it's easier to access from local territories, not always the case as I've just explained, whether it be in terms of innovative public procurement schemes, linking significant public institutions such as schools, prisons, government agencies even, whether it's through innovation in distribution systems, a particular emphasis here on cold chain technology. How are we going to ensure that the healthier fruits and vegetables are storable within urban areas in a warming global climate? And also, I've mentioned before that the principles of circular economy. A lot of work being done on how we transform food waste in urban areas back through compost into the production of food in the territories surrounding cities. The third area, and I think particularly important for this event, is expanding. How do we take the knowledge that we're generating at the local level up to global levels of governance of food systems? How do we translate that learning? And we're doing this through a number of ways. For example, city-to-city exchanges, both developed to developed countries, but also developed to developing countries, to see what sort of lessons we can share from the types of innovative policies and approaches that have been put in place in different cities in the world. And just as a closing point, what we found is that this 3E approach of enabling, executing, and expanding is particularly useful in reducing levels of fragmentation around urban food systems. And this fragmentation is seen throughout all European countries. I was hearing from somebody that in one country, 45 different parts of government have some influence on the food system within that country. Not all of them with food in their title. In fact, only 2, I think. And so we need to reduce that level of fragmentation. And I think that's particularly important for Horizon Europe. I understand that Horizon Europe, for obvious reasons of getting traction in research and innovation, taking it forward, needs to be broken down into clusters. But this mustn't be at the expense of the interlinkages between the clusters. We can't have innovative strategic food policies which just focus on farm to fork. They need to be linked to transportation, to energy, to housing, etc. So I'll leave it there. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jamie, for sharing with us your experiences on urban food systems. Corinne has talked about tangible places, and it seems to me that cities are one of such tangible places where the actors can get together, in particular if they also start food production in cities or around cities. I think the question that you raise, and which we are all faced when we are discussing about a climate-neutral Europe and society, is really how much bottom-up and how much top-down. You have been talking about the regulation of public service, of public procurements, horizontal regulations at national level. If you wait for that, probably it lasts too long. So you need bottom-up initiatives. But what is the good balance in all these things? I think that's maybe a point which we need to consider carefully. And I think we should certainly share your experience that if you have a framework program, you need at one point in time titles, clusters. So we have tried to be not in silos anymore. But whatever you do, we are in a silo. Even on the world, we are in a silo to a certain extent. But we are very well aware that you need very cross links to the different clusters, and there is a strong link between the different clusters. So I would like to introduce now our next speaker. This is Merit Johansson. She is the founder of the Real Food System, and she will talk about engaging youth in science activism. Please, Merit.
Thank you very much. Before starting my presentation, just to set the scene, I'd like to show you a video, if we can run that.
I want you to panic. I want you to act as if the house was on fire.
Today's lesson, civil disobedience. Here in Manchester and up and down the country, thousands of students from reception to year 13 skipped school to call for action on climate change.
Climate change! What do we want it? Now! What do we want?
I'm here today because it's not acceptable the government's action on climate change. They need to be doing more. It's our future.
Until you start focusing on what needs to be done, rather than what is politically possible, there is no hope. We cannot solve a crisis without treating it as a crisis.
So, what differentiates today's conversation is that we've run out of time. And I think we should ask ourselves, what is innovation at a time when the youth are holding us accountable, are telling us that we've stolen their future? We have really a duty to do, and I think with the climate science that has told us we've run out of time, we really have to put things and these discussions into perspective. It's wonderful that we're saying that food systems are central to the climate problem. But now I think we have to pace ourselves and say, okay, how can we really get these transformations going and completed within the very, very small window we have left to save humanity? So we are at an unprecedented time in history when our planetary systems are collapsing and can no longer sustain production and consumption patterns. I came here thinking this event was happening the day after the climate summit in New York. I was expecting to feel a sense of urgency. Titanic. I don't feel it. We've seen some headlines in the newspapers, but they've already been overtaken by other events going on in US, UK, you name it. Where's the sense of urgency? And that's where I really hope that the conversation that's happening in this room can get out and really become center stage for what society, what institutions, what the UN, the European Commission, governments, industry need to do to save, make this Earth habitable again, and steer it back on course. The climate emergency is now threatening our immediate survival. It is going to continue to grow to the point of no return unless and until we, whether as institutions or individuals, make profound changes. The elephant in the room, which I think, Wolfgang, you've also acknowledged, and others before me, is food systems. It's the driver and solution to our planetary emergency, but it's not center front in the discussions that are happening, where policies and targets are being set. Until the world recognizes we're just going to be tinkering on the edges of climate solutions and the health epidemic, agents of change need to drive this fundamental message home while there may still be time, and I say may still be time. And that's why I also focus on we need to really pace and put into context the conversation and the dialogue and the decisions that are happening right now. Whether we're civil servants, industry leaders, academics, or civil society, I believe we have a duty to serve the public interest. I'm otherwise a UN civil servant, and I'm committed to do what I can to promote and deliver on the right of youth to a sustainable future. And to support the demands of youth, I've established a real food systems advocacy platform in order to really push the urgency of breaking down the silos in our institutions, in our world, because they need to come together. We need to come together around the biggest, the greatest common objective. And this is also why, on the heels of the petition that was developed by EU staff, I did a similar thing for the UN staff, which led to a declaration of support to the UN Secretary General by almost 100,000 staff to lead by example and to support him in his leadership, in the response to the climate. How can we motivate youth to be agents of food systems change? By giving them a voice, by listening to their aspirations, and through our networks to help deliver on them. We need to empower them and give them an audience. This is what changes the whole dialogue so much right now, that youth are so engaged. They've turned the world upside down. They have access to leaders that I don't even have access to. Their intuition is much more accessible, and they grasp the solutions well. They're also more willing than many of us to make the adaptations that need to be made. And I think we need to focus much more on them, because they're the ones who are going to make it happen. And that's what my own directors and undersecretaries general in the UN say. Focus on the youth. Focus on the youth. They are the ones. And in fact, 2 of our Real Food Youth ambassadors, because we have now a Real Food Youth movement that's growing. We have 30, and we hope to have many more that are passing the urgency of this message. They were at the Climate Summit. They were at the Youth Summit. They were speaking to the leaders and passing the messages about the urgency. Industry, importantly, needs to adapt to new philosophies, as we've heard also, I think, from Karina, shifting from profit-making at the expense of human and planetary health towards healthy and regenerative goals. We need to make some basic changes to our lifestyles again, like cooking meals, taking a break at mealtime to sit down with friends, colleagues, or a family member, to eat from a ceramic plate and drink from a glass instead of always being on the run, always being on our phones, always consuming more plastic that is packaged in. So there's important social dimensions to this as well. There are improvements, opportunities for improvements, not just sacrifices. It is truly remarkable, I think, to witness the courage of youth, and I think we all share this admiration. Their incredible determination to really take on world leaders and industry. Youth leaders are popping up all over the world, and they will not take no for an answer. And they're getting impatient with the pace of action and change. Hierarchies are being turned upside down. Last weekend, Friday night, I was writing talking points for a 23-year-old who was going to be delivering messages in New York. Incredible. She was at the summit. I wasn't. And she delivered them, and she got them right to the top. They still have intuition. They have dreams of a future. It's our job to listen, giving them hope, a voice, and to equip them with and pursue solutions together. So, what are real food solutions? It really is simply going back to basics. What conventional wisdom, nourishing producers, communities, and the earth, respecting human life, animals, social justice, and the environment. I've run out of time, and I wasn't paying attention to the pink warning. If you give me 30 seconds more, I'll close off. Next steps. I think there's a lot that needs to be done. Exploring potential compacts, legislation, labeling, health auditing for supermarkets, a youth-centered campaign, of course, agricultural transformations. And let's have the conversations with society about the urgent need to shift diets away from the biggest GHG emitters to plant-based diets. The choices will be a lot easier once people and the public know what's at stake. The urgency. We are being and will be judged by the youth on policies and personal choices we make today. Thank you.
Thank you, Merete, for your impressive statement reminding us about the urgency of the matter. Also recalling the key role that youth plays in this process of transformation. We might certainly regret the speed of the transformation, but when it comes at least to the European Union, and if you look at our political priorities, I'm really convinced that all these patterns that you have just designed, youth involvement in these discussions on climate change, the reports again yesterday about the raising of sea levels, I think the transformation process will accelerate, and I'm really convinced when it comes at least to the European Union, our first political priority is really the carbon neutrality by 2050. And that will have huge consequences, I think, for all areas and sectors of society. Evidently, what I also think is need to start at home, and you have recalled very well that each of us can strongly contribute to this agenda. So thank you very much. Now our further process is that you should use Slido. So you have already been acquainted to this tool. Now there will be a question for each of the topics that has been presented with different options for replies, if I understand correctly. So we should now receive a question relating to food systems that are co-beneficial to Corina's talk. And the question is, where is the most feasible and fruitful opportunity in the current policy landscape to test out co-benefits? Public procurement, common agricultural policy, supporting business innovation for health and sustainability, and short supply chains. So please go ahead. We have already 2, 5. Kopf an Kopf rennen between common agricultural policy and living labs. So I think we are almost so I think we can stop here. We have 73 participants, and the area that has been identified as the most feasible and fruitful to achieve co-benefits is common agricultural policy, followed by living labs and innovation accelerators, public procurement, research and innovation through Horizon Europe. Thank you very much for your feedback and participation. We can now advance to the second area, which is the urban food systems. And the question is the following. What factor is most important in delivering urban food system transformation? Establishing a European food systems strategy to overcome fragmentation and ensure policy coherence, implementing national urban policies that provide a systemic frame, setting up local living labs to co-create and test food systems, and implementing public-private partnerships that deliver innovative, market-driven solutions. Your choice. I think again here it's a very close result. It's interesting to see that when we have just discussed before, should it be more top-down or bottom-up? I clearly see here that the front runners are the more bottom-up initiatives at local level indeed. So there is a majority favoring establishing local government integrated urban food systems policies. But evidently all these actions are not really contradictory, they can be complementary. So again, thank you very much for your participation. Now our last slide or question relates to the talk of Merit, and it's about the involvement of youth in science activism. And here the question is, what is the best way to get people to reduce their intake of foods with high GHG emissions and processed foods? Ban such foods, tax such foods, communicate about the harmful effects. 3 options. So here the most favored action is indeed to tax such foods, followed by education in schools to encourage a shift away from high-tech towards sustainable vocations. Okay, many thanks. So we are almost at the end of the first panel. Now it is your turn to come in. Either through statements, they should not be too long. We thought 1 minute to 2 minutes. Please indicate where you are from and to whom you address, if there is a question, the question. But your statements are very strongly welcomed. Also statements relating to where we should put our priorities in terms of research and innovation and deployment, if you look at the strategic planning that we have sent out for Horizon Europe. So all kind of statements and questions that relate to the topic are welcomed. Who is first? Please.
Hi. Okay. So my name's Emily, and I'm a Real Food Systems Youth Ambassador. And so what I would want to say is we talk a lot about fragmentation, and I think the key is really people mobilizing and supporting young people. So for instance, what Marita is doing with Real Food Systems in terms of giving young people a voice, it's just everyone, like civil servants, wherever you're from, just joining this movement. So it's not just young people, it's everyone together. And food is something that brings everybody together, and we've seen how important it is that we transform it from people from all different areas. So it's just that, and I just want to say, on behalf of Real Food Systems Youth Ambassadors and just young people, it's really touching to hear your words, and it's really touching to have people like Marita who believe in young people and who are empowering young people and also actively trying to make a change so that we can combat this climate emergency. So thank you.
Please, over there.
Hello. Well, my name is Jonas Lazaro, and I represent Food Drink Europe and the ETP Food for Life. And when I hear the word partnerships, really I have a word in mind, which is a multi-stakeholder approach. So I really think that if we really want change, we have to be all together in that agenda. And there is another word that comes into my mind, which is impact. And I think that's all that we want. If you want to reach the citizens, if you want to make a good use of your money, you want to get final impacts. So my main input is when we make this agenda, when we make this research and innovation agenda, we have really to include industry. We have to really include the final users for that impact. I know you have it in mind, but for the discussions that we have, sometimes it looks like industry will be in the other side of the wall, and we are not. We are part of the process. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Indeed, I think that is what I just wanted to say. If we want to ensure that research and innovation results are really deployed, it is not sufficient to have just the research. We have already since years increased cooperation with business, but research and business is not enough. You need the end users, you need stakeholders, if you want new technologies and innovations be deployed, in fact. Because it's about creating trust in new technologies, new innovations, new business models, and it's not sufficient that this is top-down. So we really need these kind of partnerships. It does not facilitate things for the reason that Corina has set out. The governance of these places becomes a real challenge. But it's not because it's complicated, we should not try to do it. So the next speaker is here, please.
Yes, thank you very much. My name is Martina Glieber. I work for Institut Mérieux. I would like to make two statements, a more professional one and a personal one. So from the professional side, I think what should really be encouraged is more research into food safety issues. Unfortunately, there are real dangers regarding microbiological controls, detect pesticides in food, detect veterinary medicines in food, unfortunately, but also fungi and mycotoxin contaminations due to climate change. So I think the topic food safety is very important. And from the personal standpoint, I think what could be interesting is to further look into innovative and close to nature focused concepts like permaculture you have probably heard about. And I think it's kind of easy because we don't need so much research because it's an easy concept and it can be easily implemented in respect of the nature and of the health of the people. But maybe what needs to be done is more research into economical aspects, how to implement this and make out an economical approach. Maybe more focused on local economies and things like that. So I think permaculture is important, and was very interesting to hear from Gérard Mulliez, who is the founder of Auchan, you probably know, the big distribution chain. And he said that everybody will be obliged to do permaculture because consumers would like to eat healthy and qualitative food and preserve nature. So I think there is a kind of change in consciousness of the people, of young people, but only less young people like myself. And we need to get closer to nature and eat food that is really not harming the nature and have a sustainable approach. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your statement. That fits well with the next speaker, who is from the European Food Safety Agency. Please. Sorry. Please go ahead. I think Stefan will come in a moment. Yes, please.
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Buscher. My name is Juliette, and I work for Starch Europe. And when our 77 starch factories produce starch, they also produce 1/3 of plant proteins. So this is where I'm coming from. I would like to echo Maria's statement to move away from unsustainable diets and unhealthy diets to a more plant-based diet. And so my question to you is, how do you intend to make this dietary shift? Because, I mean, it seems to me that it's sometimes difficult to reach out to consumers, and if youth are going to be the driver for change, how do you intend to do that? I would like to say as well that Starch Europe supports the continuation of the BBIJU, so the bio-based industries undertaking, and this is indeed important to have partnerships across the supply chain with large and small companies, and some of them do have plant protein products. And also you talked about silos, and today I mean, the Commission has the plans for plant proteins. It has a number of regulations, but for instance, the regulation on promotion does not allow the plant protein products, the foods and the drinks, to be promoted with the EU budget. So to me, this is a missed opportunity, and we have on the one side DG Research and Innovation promoting plant proteins and shifting towards more plant protein diets, yet the regulation of DG Agri does not make these products eligible. So voilà, this is the sense of my statement. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I think we take some questions, and if you feel afterwards ready to reply to some of them, that's fine. So now it's Stefan.
Yes, hi, good morning. Thanks to the speakers. Stefan Ronsvaar is my name, from the European Food Safety Authority. I liked very much the comment you made, Corinne, on after the war, people were obviously most eager to increase the production of food, with the caveats you mentioned. And the last 20 years, things have seriously changed. Another change, I think, has happened also in food safety. Luckily, today in Europe, we consumers expect good, safe food. Not only nutritious food, but also safe food. And I would like to make the plea that we need to continue for that in the future. The previous commenter made a comment on that mycotoxins with climate change is an obvious one. The other one is urbanization, also mentioned by the second speaker. When we think of urban farming, for example, there are food safety issues to be considered, like heavy metal contamination in urban areas, as an example. So probably in innovating our food systems, which is highly needed, we'll need to build in from the start food safety as a consideration. Maybe a bit parallel to quality systems. You don't add it on later, you build it in from the start. And probably for food safety, we need to do that as well in innovating our food systems. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Stefan. There is a question there, then here, and then there. Please.
Yeah, hello, I'm Karin Metzler from the European Plant Science Organization. And I very much like the idea to go for co-benefits, because what we have seen in the Horizon 20 program was more you either tackle environmental sustainability or you tackle food nutritional security. So I think it's very important to have this more connected approach. And the question to Corinne and maybe Wolfgang would be, how could we encourage maybe bottom-up ideas in the Horizon Europe program? Like from EPSO, we developed a concept for diverse and improved crops, leading to diverse diets, human health, and at the same time more resilient production. How could concepts like these be supported and many more encouraged?
Thank you very much. There is a question now there and then here. Please.
Yeah, it's rather a statement than
a question. Statement is fine. You are welcome to make statements.
Okay, thank you. My name is Sebastian.
Even critical ones.
Oh no, but, my name is Sebastian Schubert, Federal Ministry Agriculture and Food, Food and Agriculture in Germany. Our ministers have brought up the 10-point plan to tackle climate, so I'd like to add two small points for transforming food systems for people, planet and climate. One should be the increase of the energy efficiency in agriculture and green gardening. So in order to lower down the CO2 emission. Then the second part is of the 10-point plan, the avoiding of food waste. So food waste, I guess, is something which we should tackle in the transforming of food systems. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Please.
Morning, Bart van der Water from Nestlé. So just to say one thing, because we heard a lot, okay, the voice of the youth. I think it's important to mention also the voice of the business, because we have heard you really clear and loud. We are not only aware, we are also very committed. I think even more committed than many governments. When you look at Monday, what happened on Monday in New York, when you look at the commitment that I think now it's already above 100 companies, but that they were 87 companies, including mine, who are really saying, okay, we go for the path of 1.5 degree, not the 2. Net zero emissions by 2050, which is the same road than the European Commission, the new European Commission presidents want to pursue. So I think that is very important to say. There was on top of that, and I heard a lot here in the room already, biodiversity as well. I think we have really acknowledged that the 8 varieties that we have today, species that we use today, that is most covering 60-70% of what we eat, is really not enough. This needs to change. Pesticides is part of that commitment as well, to drastically reduce or avoid completely. So there is a lot really that is happening, and that I can assure you, being also very closely part of that. I think then coming to the role of the European Commission, I think when we see today and the previous days, DG RTD was probably the one in the European Commission that raised food systems the first. I think that part of the Commission should be very proud that now it's really top of the agenda. I think you brought many people together, the interconnectedness with industry, university, scientists, with you, that was great. I think we need the same also between industry, farming, and so on, all the interconnectivity that you were referring to. I think we, first of all, apart from the food sustainability communication or whatever that it will be, we need this kind of facilitation by the European Commission. I've seen recently what European Commission was able to do on recycled plastics, for example, which was a great initiative really to get voluntary commitments. I will supply, I need so much, I will give you so much, and then setting up the infrastructure. This can really change things. So I think this is really something that Commission could set up. And I also agree, final point, with one of the speakers before that was saying, okay, we should review all legislation really, fitness check for everything that deals with food here, food and non-food regulation, because we have a lot of gaps there. The CAP is just one thing, but there is much more that we can do. And I think EFSA can also play a role. Food safety, nutrition, but also sustainability, linking those three, giving their advice and putting that into the recommendations of policymakers, educators, is also one of the steps that we need.
Thank you very much. Good to hear that sometimes we do useful things. There is a speaker there, please.
Yeah. Hi, I'm Masha from the Swiss Ministry of Education, Research and Innovation. This is a clearly personal comment, not in the name of my ministry. And it's just that I'm always surprised, because to hear all the time the word encouraging, and we have to communicate and we have to inform and blah, 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 blah. I mean, at some point we have to think about what we want to propose and what we want to impose in the way of a multi-actor approach. And here I think that the politicians have to step in and be prepared to be the bad guys and just say, we have to do that, you will have to do that, and not, it would be very nice if you could do this and this and this. The second point is that while I really like research innovation, I think that there are already many alternatives where we can apply. If you think on alternative proteins, I mean, since years we're already dealing with things, with fungi, with plant systems which could substitute with proteins. Again, if you do not kind of like force citizens or farmers or whatever to use them, nothing is going to change. And then the last thing, I was quite surprised about I think it was the last Slido question where it was the question how this could be done, and then the most, or 25% I think of the people said it should be done by taxes. For sure, if you would ask the same question in Africa, or I don't know, if in a less industrialized world, I mean, you would never get that. We cannot say that rich people are allowed to do climate damage or whatever, but if you don't have enough money, you can just not afford it. I mean, it's a really dangerous distinction between who can save the planet and who cannot. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your statement. So I understand there are further demands for statements, but we are short in time. I assure you that the next round of statements will come. We will have sufficient time. The title of the session will not have changed. It's still about transforming food systems, so I'm sure your statements and remarks will still fit in the next round of statements, and I've already identified 2 speakers for the next round. So I would like to give now the opportunity to the panelists if they want to react to the one or the other statement, and then I propose that we advance to the next group of panelists. Corina?
Thank you, and thanks for those very rich set of comments and questions. I'm going to address 2 or 3 of them at once by starting with a comment that we need to stay grounded in this effort. Food is something that is very real in our lives, and we need to really stay grounded in the way that we look at research and innovation as well as the way that we look at food systems change. So part of that is this issue about how do you find these kind of bottom-up places in which you can start to create these kind of co-benefits, and where do you start? And I think the place to start is where there's been problems in actually achieving goals that are well known we need to achieve. So, for example, if you're in a school and you just want to make the food better in a school, and there's all kind of barriers and problems, there's implementation challenges, there's economic challenges, there's challenges because parents don't want you to do what you're trying to do. Policy is full of this, action is full of these barriers that actually when it comes to try and deliver something, to deliver change, it faces all of these implementation issues. So to actually start where there were some grounded real problems in getting stuff done, and then to say, let's have some kind of much more co-creative, collaborative, flexible type of process of actually trying to work through those problems together. Because what we see in the food system is an enormous amount of conflict. We can't deny that. There's an enormous amount of conflict. There's very different beliefs. There's very different value systems. There's very different ways that people identify with food. And these are kind of seen as soft things. They're not soft. They're hard because they stop from action, from being delivered. So just to respond to the comment made by the industry about how the industry is taking action, that's absolutely the case. But other people would view that action as not being productive action, which is an example of these kind of barriers. And to me, what that says is that we need to listen much, much more closely to people in the system and listen to the voices of people in big business and people who are in policy, as well as youth and people who are eating food, in order to really understand how they see the system and what the incentives and disincentives are to making change. So a cross-cutting answer to all of that is let's listen more to the voices in the system as a source of knowledge for research. Research isn't just about plant-based innovation and technical stuff. It's actually about creating new knowledge by understanding how things are in the system at once, understanding what's stopping change from happening, and then co-creating change as it happens on the ground.
Thank you very much, Corina. Jamie?
Yes, thank you. Picking up on Corina's last point, I think the key here is that we can't rely on one constituency within the food system. We can't rely on consumers to drive change. We hear a lot about consumers driving change for reasons of concern about climate, health, etc., etc. But it's actually a very small proportion of us globally who have the ability to drive change through choice. The vast majority of the global population simply don't have that choice to be able to do that. So we need to be working across the different actors. The point from our colleagues in business is particularly relevant. In some contexts, they will be the key drivers of change. In other contexts, it's going to be public regulatory agencies tackling issues of food safety, which in some contexts won't be tackled by other constituencies. So we have to recognize that different configurations will be needed in different contexts to move the transformation forward. And we do have existing platforms to do this. The One Planet Network, which was in fact launched at Rio +20, so quite some years ago, involves 160 partners across governments, industry, including Nestle and others, international organizations, civil society, to try to think some of these things through. How do we get a transformative process going which is relevant to a particular context, instead of imposing a model which many of us think consumer, but that's not always going to be the case.
Thank you very much, Jamie. Merite?
Thank you. No, I would agree with what my colleagues on the podium have said. I think that the urgency and the relationship, the extent to which our diets have an impact on the current emergency of our planetary health and our human health, for that matter, is something that is just not clearly understood. The fact that a meal of animal protein accounts for as much as over 4,000 kilometers of driving. I mean, those dimensions are not widely understood. So I think massive education campaign with the public, coupled by solutions, alternatives, in reintroducing the culture of cooking that has been lost, and that's really what the real food system is about. It's really about just promoting traditional wisdom and building also on indigenous wisdom. And if we take it outside of Europe, it's also really what maybe identifying champions in different parts of the world and adapting what real food needs in different parts of the world. So I think it's at many different levels that we need to work. We want to get an advocacy campaign going on a bigger scale. We're looking for partners and organizations to team up with. But I would agree also with the comments made by Nestle. We have to engage with industry. This is critical. With academia, with governments, with multilateral institutions. Thank you.
Thank you very much to our panelists. I think you've done a great job, and you married in. Thank you very much. I invite now the next round of panelists to join me on the podium, please. Some water. So, without further ado, I would like to pass the floor now over to Sir Charles Godfrey. He's a director at the Oxford Martin School, and his topic is dietary shift a dream? Please.
Thanks very much, and it's a great pleasure to be here. And I'm going to start off with some of the comments that have been made already, and follow up something Corinna said, that we should realize quite how much progress has been made, although a huge amount to go. I'm encouraged that there is a consensus that when we talk about diets, we should be thinking not only about health, which was traditionally what went into dietary advice, but also about the environment. I'm encouraged that there's a fair consensus about what good diets are. In particular, we need to eat more fruit and vegetables, that we need to moderate our meat consumption. But there is much less certainty about how we get there, and that to me is a real challenge, and that's what I'm looking forward to in the research plans ahead. And there is a need for much more research, but I think it's really important for us in the research community to say that when we call for more research, there is a lot we can do now. So calling for more research is not an argument about delaying for what we know that works and what we can do at the moment. So I'm going to very briefly talk about 4 different topics. I think that if we look at the challenges of food systems ahead, we must pay great attention to both supply and demand. We need to change diets, and we need to produce more food of the right type. So how do we change diets? Well, clearly, information and education is important, and we can do that better, and we need research to understand how we can do that better. But it is not enough. There is a lot of research that shows the limitations of education and information. And also it is worrying because for governments this is the easiest thing to do. It puts the agency on the consumers. So without in any sense saying it's not important, it is not sufficient. And we have to look at other issues. We have to look at things such as fiscal interventions. And with the proviso of one of the speakers from the floor who says one has to be very careful about regressive aspects of fiscal intervention, we need more exploration of how that works. Coming from the UK, where we have had an industry tax on sugary sodas, which has led to significant reformulation. Once you get it right, it is really important. And there are issues around regulation and the difficulties of regulations and how one can actually, as governments, put in things that one knows that is right. Jean-Claude Juncker said, I think quite recently, quite often we know what to do. We don't know how to get re-elected when we do them. So in order to be able to get these right, we need better information about the dietary, about the health and the environmental consequences of different food types. And just a brief advert, we in Oxford, in a project called Hestia, which we're launching in Brussels on Monday, are trying to do a big database which will be publicly available of essentially every LCA that is available for different food out there with uniform standards to enable these better conversations to be had. And in order to have conversations about fiscal interventions, about regulations, again, and this is going to be my last point, we need to come back to thinking about the political economy of change. How we as individuals, and Merita very eloquently talked about this, how we as individuals, how the youth can give our politicians the license to change. We need to think about the food we produce. It's pretty inconceivable that we have as an option bringing more land into agriculture. When we are talking about producing more food to feeding approximately 10 billion people by the middle of the century, that almost inevitably means growing more food from our current agricultural footprint with less effects on the environment. So this is sustainable intensification. A sustainable intensification has genetic components. It has ecological components. How do we mobilize our knowledge of the ecology of agricultural systems? And it has market components as well. We know that we're not going to stop eating meat, and many people say that's a good thing. But when we continue to produce the types of food that have, at the moment, high greenhouse gas consequences, we need ways to try and reduce that. And there are all sorts of fascinating research agendas there, from rumen biology to better manure management to denitrifiers and things like this. Some of this is high-tech, but some of it is low-tech as well. I worry as a research community, we have abandoned some, well, not abandoned, but we pay less attention to some of the less high-tech aspects of research than, for example, soil science. I was delighted to see the new mission on that. And we need to think not only about food systems, but landscape systems. We need to think about multifunctional landscapes. We need to think about the comparative advantage of different types of land to produce food, to produce fuel and fiber, and to produce the other ecosystem services, everything from carbon sequestration to recreation to water management. So going from generalities, I want to say a few things about specifics, about alternative proteins, of which we've heard some discussion from the floor and the speakers previously. This is really exciting. I'm not sure we in Europe are putting as much investment in this as we see in the States. There are many different aspects of alternative proteins. We have plants and mycoproteins, which are, in a sense, ready to go at the moment. The research and development challenges there seems to be, yes, there is some science research there, but it's a scalability, getting the price down. It's all very good having Impossible Burgers and things like that, but if they're at a price point that only middle-class consumers can have, then it doesn't make, it's not going to make transformational change. Algae, insects, cultured meat, these are all really exciting, and they need both research and the development. And we need a much better understanding of what they will do to the environment, what they will do for our health, and of course food safety issues as well. So my final point is on the political economy of change. And this to me is almost the most important. And I think it affects all of us. If we've learned anything from what's happening in my country at the moment, which almost wants to make me want to cry, what's happening in the States, we need to understand the dynamics of change. If we're calling on people to eat less meat, this will affect the livelihoods of those who are producing meat at the moment. Unless we ensure there is an equitable transition, we're going to engender a large community against change. We have to understand those dynamics. We have to understand how we put monies into rural economies, which is inevitable in a high-wage economy such as in North America and in the UK. We have to understand how we can do things like CAP better. I agree completely with all the speakers who have said that the private sector is really critical to transforming food productions. But there are enormous challenges to the private sector. And it's a fascinating time in the private sector when you see that many of the issues around purpose, about what it means to be an ethical private sector company, are sort of coming out of the sort of ESG ghetto and becoming mainstream. Smart companies realize they're not going to be able to attract the best employees if they do things right. So I'm encouraged by the direction of travel, but God, it's a long way to go. And I think there are other challenges as well, to us in the research community to get out of our silos and do things more joined up, to the NGO community. And the NGO community do wonderful jobs in pushing for change, but they have their own shibboleths. And if they believe that the challenges are as great as people say, then they need to look to their own shibboleths, their own fixed ideas, in the same way that they're arguing the private sector needs to as well. And finally, we need political bravery from our political leaders. And we need them to be brave, but we as individual citizens need to change the social norms, change the conversations to give them the political license that we need them to do to make these really hard changes. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sir Charles Godfrey, for your speech. I think you rightly recalled that calling for more research is a good thing, but the other issue is also to ensure that the knowledge and good practices which we already have to be rolled out. And I think that's a common challenge to all research areas, not only in this specific one, but indeed it's at the same time the most difficult question, how to ensure that the research and research results are really deployed. So I really appreciated your talk, also your consideration in what you called as political economy, in order to have a holistic approach, taking into consideration the effects of what we are doing, for example, in the dietary shift, on other sectors of our economy, of the livelihood of people, also on biodiversity, by the way, and other elements. So I think the key question in all this is what Carol has said about interconnectivity, and really to be sure that we realize the consequences of what we are doing in one place, it has in other parts of our society. So thank you again very much for this speech. Now our next speaker now is Samantha Burgess. She is head of the European Marine Policy at the WWF, and her topic is plastic food a reality? Hopefully not.
Thank you very much, and thank you for the invitation to speak here today. So plastic pollution affects the natural environment everywhere in the world. It's been found in the deepest oceanic trench in the Pacific Ocean, the Marianas Trench. It's been found in sea ice in the Arctic. It's pervasive and it's everywhere. Since 2000, the world has produced as much plastic as all the preceding years combined, growing at 4% per annum. If we look at the projected growth of plastics, it will increase by up to 40% per annum. So we need to change this. As of today, a third of plastic waste ends up in nature. This accounts for 100 million tonnes in 2016. 8 million tonnes of this plastic waste enters the ocean. If nothing changes, by 2025, we will be looking at 1 metric tonne of plastic for every 3 metric tonnes of fish. Can you imagine that? That when you eat lunch at work, 1 out of 6 of your plastic sandwich wrappers or plastic salad bowls, they end up in the ocean because of the infrastructure that isn't in place for recycling. Plastic is used as a disposable material to such an extent that 75% of all plastic ever produced is waste. This is fundamentally wrong. Plastic is not inherently bad. It is an invention that has generated huge benefits for society, particularly in medical care and in food safety. So it's critical that we continue to use it, but use it in a much more sustainable way. Unfortunately, due to mismanagement from industries and from governments, the way society has converted this valuable product into a disposable convenience, it's transformed this innovation into an environmental planetary disaster. What I'm going to talk more about today is microplastics. So microplastics are a type of plastic that are under 5 millimeters in length. There's primary and secondary microplastics. So primary microplastics are like the microbeads that we used to find in cosmetic products. Now they've been banned in most European countries, but it's also in our clothes. So the majority of microplastics that are found in drinking water, in the ocean, come from synthetic fibers from our clothes. So it shows how much innovation we have to do to try and remove those fibers and those pathways for microplastics entering the system. The secondary microplastics are ones that break down in nature. So your sandwich wrappers, your plastic bags, your drink bottles, they all degrade in sunlight and break down into smaller and smaller pieces. Microplastics are contaminating the air that we breathe, the water that we drink, and the food that we eat. A study by the University of Newcastle in Australia has suggested that an average person could be ingesting approximately 5 grams of plastic per week, or 50,000 particles. So let's just consider that for a moment. 5 grams of plastic is the same size as a credit card. Can you imagine willingly, knowingly consuming a credit card worth of plastic every week? It obviously depends on what we eat, but the studies on food products that have included both tap water and bottled water, honey, beer, salt, and obviously shellfish and fish, they all contain microplastics to varying degrees. There's a big difference between drinking water, tap water, and bottled water, an order of magnitude difference, and it depends, of course, on where you are in the world. So you'll be pleased to know European tap water is among some of the cleanest, but unfortunately, in places like Asia, where they have worse waste management systems, the contamination levels are much, much higher. And the reality is, we don't know yet the long-term health implications of this ingestion and inhalation of plastic. The World Health Organization is concerned about this. They're undertaking a review of the existing scientific evidence, but the reality is we don't have enough data. So research and innovation is really critical to try and understand this problem and what impacts it has not only for my generation, not only for the next generation, but for the children born today. What is their plastic load going to be in 10 years' time, in 20 years' time? We need to be incredibly clear that plastic has a very important role to play, and the goal is not to get rid of it, but to manage it better. All materials have an environmental impact, and in some cases, the environmental impact of other materials can be greater than plastic. So we need to look at this problem holistically and include issues like climate and water use to produce these materials. Oh. I don't know whose that is. So there are three things that we can do to change the way that we're looking at this. The first one is to get rid of unnecessary plastic in our food and consumption supply chain. If it doesn't provide any important functionality, like things like food safety or reducing food waste or medical purposes, why do we have that plastic in our lives? We also need to focus on improving the circularity of plastic, which is required. This can be done by improving recycling and by looking at reuse systems that plastic remains in circulation rather than leaks out into the environment. Importantly, this requires significant investment, ideally from businesses that benefit from plastics, but also from government regulation. And this is where extended producer responsibility comes in. We also need to support innovation and research around sustainable alternative materials, as well as sustainable circular delivery methods, so that we can focus from products towards services that could dramatically reduce the need for packaging. While many companies like to push the line that consumers are responsible for littering and making the effort to separate and recycle, the reality is that only 9% of plastics are recycled, and many plastics that exist right now can't be recycled because they're made of different types of plastic or they're too complicated. Again, this is something that's managed at a municipality level, so we need more standardization across countries, across the EU, to ensure that if you're traveling between Brussels and Berlin or Brussels and Paris, you can recycle the same types of plastic in the same way wherever you are. Obviously, you can choose to avoid plastic, but if you go into any shop, this is incredibly hard to achieve. So we really need to look at the pressure that consumers can put on both businesses and on governments to change behavior and radically change the system. In terms of the role that research can play, there's so many opportunities for innovation around investigating alternative sustainable materials, around creating circular flows for plastics. It's essential that we keep plastics in circulation, in the system, rather than leakage to the environment. And we need to understand the impacts on human health of these conservative estimates on the load of microplastics that we're consuming. There's a lot of innovation, companies, particularly from the private sector, companies are looking at lasers to imprint labels on food products rather than using plastics. But one of the things that we need to do is really look at that sharing opportunities and reduce the competition between different businesses so that everything is mainstreamed at the same time and we get more progression as quickly as possible. I've got one final point. One of the fascinating things about plastics is how much it motivates people, and it's such an emotive issue. We see any time that there's a dead whale or dolphin on the beach, the public outcry of how could this happen. In terms of my work at WWF, it's one of the most successful campaigns we've had, with over 1 million signatures from 125 countries looking at a global ban on plastics leaking into the environment. This is a topic at the UN, and it's something that we need society to come together on so that we're not facing these microplastic loads in the future. Thank you.
Samantha, thank you very much. Quite a scaring picture, and I think we concur that for once, in particular when it comes to microplastic, more research is required. Always more required research, but here in particular because I think our chief scientists who have looked at the health issues or health consequences of microplastic have concluded, as you have indicated, that there is not much evidence yet about the short, mid and long-term consequences of of microplastic in food. So thank you very much. Our last speaker on the panel is Bernhard Kovac. He is head of the Innovation Accelerator at the United Nations World Food Programme, and he will talk about the role of accelerators in transforming food systems. And I think in the light of what we have just heard, who translates all this knowledge in real life, this will be a very interesting talk. Bernhard, please.
Thank you very much. Yeah, and it's really great to talk about food systems and what the role of accelerators actually can be in transforming that. Like, why am I actually speaking here? I mean, you can say, well, you know, accelerators of the World Food Programme, that's great. But what about food systems as a whole? It's actually quite interesting. So in my background, I co-founded an app in the first place that's called Share the Meal, so that people can share their meals with the child in need. And we also ran through an accelerator program in the first place. And that led me actually then to start the accelerator for the World Food Programme to say, what if we have a support infrastructure that really can help us find those innovations and startups that can transform how we help people. Now, the World Food Programme's the Innovation Accelerator is now actually a program that we do for the United Nations World Food Programme, so actually to help us reach zero hunger. It's very much a European project because it's generously funded by the German government, the Netherlands, and also Luxembourg. But actually, one of the things that we are now also doing, we're running an accelerator program for the Gates Foundation on vaccines. We've done a program for Cargill together, actually, on finding solutions in the space of food systems and smallholder farmers globally. And this is very, very much an interesting aspect in the policy conversation. I was very pleased with some of the polls actually from the audience here, where people were saying, well, we need these living labs, we need those accelerators that can really help us drive that policy conversation into action. And this is an interesting question, like what actually brings policy into action? And I truly believe one of the answers is startups or innovations that can actually take action. And that can be for-profit or non-profit to that matter. So it could be anything from a university research team, it could be an NGO startup, it can be a for-profit startup, it can be a company that actually bring these new solutions together that we need to actually transform those food systems. And what is interesting is, this is the case for us as World Food Programme in the area of zero hunger, because it's the exact same issue that we're all trying to solve. We're looking for the best and brightest ideas, the best minds that can help us achieve something that hasn't been done before. And I think that's important when we're talking about innovations. It's not, yes, we also need research, because we do need to have the foundational elements in place. But in order to have real innovations actually take action, you need to have the best minds that actually take the energy and actually really use their time and their energy to solve something for a better planet. And in the area of food system in particular, is like, how do you actually do this? It's an area that, you know, maybe historically it has not been as sexy maybe as if you're founding like a startup that does like a, you know, a dating app or a ride-sharing app or anything else that you've been doing. Like, and you see so much talent and energy going into app development, new business products, new startups. How can we make food systems innovation and startups really, really, you know, attractive for people? Because to make it the system that we actually want to be active in. And from our work, let me just explain how we've been approaching this. So we're based in Munich in Germany, where we run our Global Accelerator program. And so we actually bring the best innovators and startups to Munich right now, where we run a one-week training program, and then we actually support the innovators wherever their user is. And this is important when we're talking about startups and innovators. Historically, there have been lots of also like presence programs for accelerators that works very well, and it can also work very well locally when you have, like, let's say 10 or 12 startups in one place. There's a community, an esprit de corps, where the people are actually learning from each other. You have mentors, they get cash, and they also really learn how business practices work. And this is the core of an accelerator, is you're trying to compress the learning program for those innovators innovators, so you're from wherever they are, so that they can actually reach the next level in their development. And that can actually take multiple factors. So it can be just sitting in one physical space, it can be coaching, it can be connection with mentors, and in a lot of cases it's actually also cash, and we shouldn't underestimate this. Depending on what your background is and what you've been doing before, maybe you don't have the savings, maybe you haven't been in a corporation before, so you can't actually just go start a startup. Maybe you don't find investors immediately. So one of the aspects that can actually help you to start a company or start a startup is having this seed money in the early stage. Now, should it be a non-profit or a for-profit startup? It's an interesting question, specifically in the food system space, and we're talking about co-benefits. Should it benefit the people, or should it benefit just making profit? I actually believe personally there's a role for both. There's also a role for the private sector, because you can do well by doing good things. And you can actually create solutions that can help, in our case, food systems, as well as moving those things forward. And the key aspect of everything that all those startups that ever run through accelerators that are successful, it's about the team, it's about the startup. So you need to have the people that are actually driving it. So whatever our solutions are to supporting innovations and startups, it has to focus on the people that are actually working on them. Because sometimes we have these conversations about, well, this is a great paper, that's not a great paper, and then we're looking for somebody who can actually implement it. It's not as easy. And I give you one example. So in our case, we had just one of our entrepreneurs who submitted an idea. He's an actual refugee from a Sahrawi refugee camp in southwest Algeria. He submitted an innovation to use hydroponics to grow animal fodder for the animals actually in the community where he lives. We actually were just bringing him to the Social Good Summit in New York on Sunday, and he presented in his own words, he was telling his story, how he had the idea for his own community, and it's now scaling in 8 different countries already, benefiting over 6,000 people that now have a livelihood growing animal fodder and actually having more nutritious meals for their own community, but also inspiring others to actually replicate this. And I just want to leave you with the thought about, like, so what is it actually that we're trying to do? And there's multiple benefits that we can have through accelerators. One is, if we're looking for the best innovations that can truly transform food systems, probably accelerators are one of the answers, because that's a mechanism to actually support them. But you can also have other side benefits, which is like, yes, you want to be part of an innovation ecosystem. You can build up clusters where you have in a particular area with the industry, with research, with the NGOs, a strong ecosystem that you can actually get it together. So with this, I want to thank you. Thank you very much. Oops. I'm falling over. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Bernhard, for sharing with us your practical experiences, very interesting experiences as to how accelerate transforming food systems. Now, you are already used to our next steps. We will have now questions on Slido on the 3 topics that have been dealt with. And the first question is, you are all on Slido? Not yet, because it does not move. But the first question is quite an interesting one. In which of these areas of research should we invest to foster alternative protein in Europe? Legumes and other plants, fungal, whatever, innovations in food processing, innovations in gastronomy, algae, and seaweed.
What's your view? Legumes and other plants. Okay. For me, I think seaweed. I don't think it can scale. Right.
So I think it's clearly in the area of legumes and other plants. but there is also big potential in innovations in food processing, and certainly food from the oceans will play an increasing role. Not much to be expected from innovations in gastronomy, according to your opinion. Okay, thank you very much. Point taken. Next question related to microplastics. What actions are you prepared to take as a consumer to reduce your plastic consumption? So now it's really you personally. And you have to invent the reply, if I understand correctly. Drink less water. No. So I assume that's something else. It's about
maybe the bottle.
Replacing plastic bottles. Water. Use glass. So I think it's about, you can do a lot in terms of be more reflective in your shopping, in the use of plastic more generally, and I understand the use of bottles, glass bottles. Thank you very much. Now, on the last topic about accelerators in transforming food systems, the question is, what is the most critical bottleneck to bring innovations, startups to scale? Specific support programs, hands-on support on most critical challenges, support to reach out to partners, support to get real use cases, clients, access to funds is quite in the lead. So indeed, I think one of the most critical bottlenecks was and remains access to funds. You know that in Horizon Europe, we try to address it in particular through the European Innovation Council, at least when it comes to breakthrough disruptive innovation. But this is clearly the front runner here. Again, access to funds is the most critical bottleneck. Thank you very much for your participation. This leaves us about 10 minutes now for further statements and questions, and as I've indicated, I've already noticed two speakers. One is here and one was over there. Please. This is the first speaker here.
Thank you very much. My name is Juana Negu. I work for the European Farmers and Agri-Cooperatives here in Brussels. I have 3 points that I would like to stress and then maybe get some reactions. First is linked also to the first session, the youth. It will be good also to look at the future farming generations. As you maybe know, we have in Europe only 11% of the farmers are below 40. And it will be good to involve them in the discussions as they are our, let's say, future food producers in Europe. On the conflict sides, it was mentioned in the first, but also in the second part, yes, we have a discussion also on the unfair trade practices, and we hope to advance on this. And then a very, I have to say, also emotional message from our side, because we saw recently a lot of attacks on farms. Last week in France, there were a farmer woke up in the morning and found his farm burnt. So I think things went a little bit too far. We have launched yesterday with other 11 organizations a campaign on the Meet the Facts. Please look on the website. We are surrounded by very simplistic messages and sometimes not founded by science. And it is important to be more informed, to inform also young generation of the high level of standards that we have in Europe, not only on the food safety, EFSA it's here, but also on environment. And we should be proud of what we have achieved. You have clearly mentioned we have achieved a lot and we have still a lot to do. And we can do it together, and farmers are committed on this. Then on the transformation, we are not so sure about the word transformation, if we really need to transform or we need to improve maybe. We find it a little bit maybe too strong to transform the sector. But when looking at the transformation, again, some figures, because maybe here in the cities we are used to have access to broadband. I can tell you that 50% of the rural areas in Europe, they don't have access to high-speed broadband. And this is very important for innovation also. We are very happy to support more innovation, to be part in the multi-actor project you have mentioned, and to use more technologies. But there are some investments needed still in rural areas. So, and then maybe a last point is the global picture versus EU. I think sometimes we mix EU or we discuss about the global challenges and not reflecting maybe what we've done already in EU. So we need to look and to see how we can help maybe. We are also working with farmers' organizations from other countries, how we can help and work together to tackle climate change and other important issues for our future. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your statement. Indeed, I think what we need is holistic solutions. There was another remark there, I think. You were the second. Who was the second one? Yeah, that's for you. Please, no, it's the gentleman. You are next.
All right. Thank you very much. My name is...
So it's again another one.
Go ahead.
Please just give the mic to the colleague here, because he has been waiting already from the last round. Sorry for that.
Thank you. You're kind. I'm Niels Heilberg from Aarhus University. I have a proposal for you in the Commission, please. I want to argue a bit first. It seems that we've heard today how the food systems concept has now gained wide acceptance. It's a very intriguing concept, but it's also very difficult to handle. And there's just so many different food systems. We don't even know how to draw their boundaries well enough to really study them. Anyway, as we've heard this morning also, one of the advantages of that concept is that we can look for leverage points where politicians, scientists, or local actors can intervene. And we have identified and heard that there might be positive synergies in changing people's diets for better health and improving environmental impact of the food. And by the way, we heard from Danik Potoczny yesterday that if you look at what food does, our diet does towards environment, it's less the climate. There are a lot of different other things we can do for the climate, but in terms of biodiversity and land-related eutrophication and other stuff, food is also very important. So we need to think about that. Now then, today we've heard of a lot of examples of using city region systems or local food labs and short supply chains and new types of protein and what have you. And it's all going to find its place in transforming food systems because we need a lot of innovations. Anyway, what I'm really lacking is actually some kind of overall assessment and collection of experiences. And we did in a SCAR strategic working group on food systems, we did a first preliminary review of how research and pilot projects have demonstrated the value of a food systems approach. But we really recommend that you set up some kind of experience collecting mechanisms for also portfolio management of what is going to be supported in future, and especially to look at what is scalable, because we all know very good, romantic examples of small initiatives, local food chains that has done wonderful things, but to what extent and what do we need to make them scalable? And we really do need to realize that the large-scale food production companies, both in Europe and globally, will be major players. And how do we include solutions that actually make changes in those companies and make and benefits this double, the synergy between health and environment? Thank you. So a proposition for the Commission to consider in the Horizon Europe setup.
Thank you very much for this very pertinent suggestion. Now I have, yes, you, I think, and then the lady, isn't it?
I'm going first?
I think it was the lady. Yes, please, go ahead.
Thank you. My name's Essie Lindstead, and I work with NGOs on cross-sector partnerships and organising for sustainability. So one question to Sir Charles Godfrey. It'd be great if you could tell us what some of those NGO shibboleths are so that I can tell my clients that this is what the University of Oxford say about it. The second is a comment on something that came up in Karina Hawke's talk as well, and with Sir Charles Godfrey, talking about the soft sciences or low tech. And I think it's really useful to hear it valorized as political economy, or some, there's a tendency, for the area of social sciences or behavioral economics to be seen as less significant in research and innovation than hard sciences. And I think we can see from the kind of discussion that we have here and the focus on urgency that we also need to invest in research and innovation at the level of deployment and resolving implementation challenges, so that we can work on those sweet spots, and I think that's a really useful framing, and avoid some of these areas where lack of information and lack of effective science communication has led to terrible incidents like the one we heard about with the burning of farms. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I have still 2 questions, because then we have to stop. We can still discuss in the cafeteria afterwards or in the village. Please.
Hello, my name is Konstantin. I'm representing IPIF, the International Platform of Insects for Food and Feed. We're approaching lunchtime, but I'm not going to speak about how to replace meat with insects. Instead, I'm going to question the term sustainable. What does it mean? We have, I think, learning the lessons from the first speaker, we have to think in a life cycle perspective. And also we have to take into account that certain animals, for instance, such as fish and poultry, actually have insects as part of their natural diet. So including edible insects in animal feed would also be a step forward in, let's say, unleashing the circularity potential of the agri-food nexus. Because, well, as we've heard, people will not stop eating meat, so we have to consider all these tiny changes that will improve the, let's say, sustainability aspects of the agri-food nexus. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your comment. You might not like the notion of sustainability, but what you are saying, I think, is quite the right thing to do. Next speaker.
Hi, I'm Magdalena. I'm a national contact point for Horizon 2020, and I come from Poland. It's the country where cooking tradition and eating together tradition are still strong. I have a question to Sir Charles Godfrey, because today you pick up a very important point, the point of getting the price and the point of scalability. And my question is, how can we reach the right price? How can we reach the affordable solutions? Because they are there. There are some alternatives for plastics, there are some alternatives for proteins, but still they are out of reach of most of the citizens. So how can we reach sustainable innovations which are affordable?
Thank you very much. You have been the last speaker. Now I would like to ask Sir Charles Godfrey maybe very shortly to reply to the questions, because he has been directly addressed. Please,
okay, so very briefly, first the really important points made by the lady from the European Farmers Organization. I do worry deeply about the polarization of the debate between complete anti and complete pros. We've got to get over that. We have to do things such as, your statistic about rural broadband, some wonderful exceptions, Spain being a great example, we need much more than that. There is one thing I disagree with you with, though, that I do think it is a radical transformation, not just an improvement. And I think we have to work so that it is an opportunity for your members, not just a threat. The lady from the NGO organisation sort of asked, what is the Oxford view on the shibboleths that the NGO should come over? We don't have a collective view, sort of a collection of academics don't. But what I was getting at there is that the NGOs are rightly asking the private sector to do something really, really radical. Now, many of the environmental NGOs have ruled out things. And I'm not saying that they should rule them in, but some of the things that have been ruled out, including certain nuclear technology, certain high-tech biological technologies, if they produce the public goods and the environmental and health benefits, they should not be ruled out a priori. And then the very last, again, really important comment about scalability. I think that is largely a challenge for the private sector, and it may be happening. We're seeing some of the very large, big food companies getting into some of these alternative proteins, especially the plant-based food proteins, and that will tend to drive down the prices. I think there is a question to look for the large amounts of indirect and direct subsidies that we currently put into the food sector deliberately or through tradition, and just see which of them can be changed in order to bring in these environmentally more benign food types.
Thank you very much. I propose that we give a hand to our panelists. You've done a great job. Thank you very much. This brings us to the end of our session. I really would like to thank you for your active participation, for your rich contributions. My conclusions in 3 words. I think there is agreement there is a sense of urgency. We all realize that the governance we need to transform these food systems is quite a complex matter. How much bottom-up, how much top-down do we need, also in order to translate research results. And the last point I take away, that was the point of Sir Godfrey, was about polarization does not help us. We need holistic solutions that comprise all our societies. So thank you very much again for your participation, and I wish you all the best. No, I like very much your last point, because all these